Night Pitch Episode 12. I'm Justin Wick. He is Evan Johnson. Evan, I was thinking about all of the things over the course of my playing career and even beyond. There are a few things that frustrate me more in this game than people saying things that are just fillers. Like if you're just saying cliches or jargon just for the sake of trying to make it look like you know what you're talking about. This stemmed from, I can remember, I don't even know where I was, what team I was playing for, but a coach was saying after a loss, we lost by like 2 or 3 runs. It was a tough game. We didn't play very well. The coach has an opportunity to motivate the whole team by saying, this is what we need to work on. This is how we get better. And his justification was instead, we need more energy in the dugout. That was what we did wrong. And it absolutely killed me. So, Evan, how's the energy in your dugout right now? It's absolutely pouring snow in Iowa, by the way. I don't want to steam over that to get started. How are you holding up?
I'm good. Just went and shoveled for like 2 hours. That was a lot. There's a lot.
I can confirm.
Baseball sayings, though?
I'm just thinking, like, when people say energy in the dugout, I absolutely hate that because it just has such little substance. And if you watch baseball at its highest form in the big leagues, like the dugout energy is just kind of there. I mean, I get that there's a difference between playing amateur ball where you don't play as many games. And yes, you can encourage players that maybe aren't as refined of players. But when an amateur coach leans on that for an explanation on why they could be playing better, there are a few things that drive me up a wall, quite like that comment.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's weird because I watch, college and NFL football, and there's a major difference between like an NFL coach and like a college coach. Like the NFL coach is
Mike
usually
Norvell with Florida State versus just Bill Belichick walking around the sidelines.
Right, and I think it's like trying to motivate your players, I guess. And I mean, you might need some energy in the dugout, but like if everybody's focused, I don't know. It's interesting because like sometimes you might need it, sometimes not so much. But I think that one of the things that really sticks out to me is stuff that coaches would say that it always ran me the wrong way. Was just throw.
You knew it was just ridiculous.
Just throw strikes. Come on, just throw strikes. Like, oh, good. Good. I get it now. Thanks for telling me that. I didn't realize that I was supposed to throw strikes. Thanks for the help.
Like, there's a kid just having an absolute meltdown on the mound. He's like a 10-year-old, and you have the well. I mean, honestly, I think about this is something that I encourage players to really kind of embrace, especially at the amateur levels. You can kind of decode how specialized or refined of a coach you're working with based on how they address the team in those key situations. Like if I had a pitching coach yell to me, just throw strikes, all of his credibility is gone. Like that means he doesn't technically know how to tell you to operate to work more efficiently. Like you're telling a 10-year-old kid, this is all you need to do is throw strikes. First and foremost, this kid might not know anything about body kinematics or actual mechanics of throwing. I guess that's the premise that I was kind of going for, of the baseball sayings that people will dish out that you can just instantly be like, this guy maybe doesn't know what we thought he was talking about.
Yeah. Just throw strikes always gets me. Just relax and pitch to contact. That cracks me up. Pitch to contact for me is almost worse than just throw strikes.
Yeah, just pitch to cut. You got a team. I mean, I understand the functionality of like if you try to do that. If you're trying to strike everybody out, that might. But that's true though. That's such an invalid. That just disregards so many other points. Like, what if you're such a good pitcher that like literally the other team can't even touch you, and then the coach is telling you to just pitch to contact?
I don't think he would if you weren't getting touched.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'm just saying that pitch to contact is not a thing. It's not a thing. You go out there. You try to strike out as every single hitter by beating them within the box. Not being tricky, you're just beating them within the box. And pitch to contact is not a real thing, especially now, because now it's like hitters will not swing as much because they know they're going to get, 2, maybe 3 pitches in like their damage zone per game. And they just wait for those. Yeah. And then when those come, they take, the biggest hack ever. It's like the total opposite of what baseball was, old school, I feel like.
You're working the count. You're trying to feed this whole thing. Well, I mean, that's interesting all at the same time because as the game progresses, like so many of these cliches that it's easy for a coach to just say this. Like I'm thinking of just the most non-technical coaching verbal cues that you will hear at the field. I can think of my favorite is when there's a pitcher like that has a really high spin that like their efficiency is where it needs to be. They've got more vertical break type of set. Like the pitchers that work best with a fastball up in the zone. And then just some 1980s coach is out there just telling dot up the knees, just throw low in the zone. Like just get your ground balls, man. Yeah, here we go. Like and then you actually see a pitching report. It's like, no, you should be hitting the top of that strike zone every single time.
You see like data.
Jeez, the technical side of things. And I think that's interesting too, because not everybody has the resources to know. I mean, a data-driven approach isn't accessible for everybody across the board, but a clueless approach is accessible for everybody across the board. And it's challenging because, I mean, this is something I can attest to of, I guess for those of you that don't necessarily know your boy's life story, post-COVID, I was a high school English teacher for a couple months. Fun fact, I know. There you go. So it dawned on me, I was in my mid-20s and I was in here and I see the teachers that were walking into these classrooms and then I reminisce back on the teachers that were walking into my high school classrooms. I'm not saying this to bash them, but while you're in the system of education, you revere these people as the authority and they're the ones that guide you. And all of a sudden I was in here as a teacher. There was a teacher shortage and I needed money, so I just walked right in. And then I was looking around at the other teachers going, now all of a sudden I'm in this group leading everybody else. Like, how qualified do you really need to be? I mean, there are some really good teachers, and I'm not saying that to bash it, but it was like you walk in there and you're just like, now that I know that these people are the baseball coaches, like these are the ones that are doing this. So I'm not saying that to be bashful necessarily, but I think that it's amazing to see how just catchphrases can click on, and it's easier to follow a crowd. This is something, I mean, if you go to like any college sorority or fraternity and you hear how everybody talks, I like exactly the same. I think the biggest thing that bothers me is to see how these ideas just get recycled and you're leaning on the ideas of other people that don't have value, but they make it sound like you know what you're talking about. And I'm not calling anybody out in particular on this, but you see coaches that'll go to the ABCA convention every January. They come back with other ideas. Well, the premise on going there to get the ideas is to know the functionality behind it. And I can only help but wonder, there's probably a handful of them that are just taking those drills and saying, yeah, I saw this at a convention and we're going to do this now. And they don't know like the actual purpose behind it. So I think the ABCA is a great system. I'm not trying to be bashful of this. It's just I understand that when you try to play the part without the context clues, I think that that's a very dangerous territory that some people could dive into.
Yeah. I always, that was always one of my pet peeves, is just kind of like a one size fits all approach to pitching or baseball, where like you said, like a coach will just recycle something that he heard and just plug it in when it may not be good for half the staff or more than half of the staff. Right. And that's the same thing with like baseball sayings, like just throw strikes, pitch to contact, like all these things that have just been like, recycled and said over and over. It's like, I think that might not be like the best approach to training at all. Like, I think it needs to be more adaptable. It needs to be more realistic, I guess I'll say.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting that you kind of put that out there as far as like the people that are craving authority. And I'm not saying this to necessarily be bashful for coaches as a whole. I don't sound derogatory with this necessarily, but I think of it's easy just to lean back on, well, what are we doing? Well, we need to be more of a team. Well, how do we need to be more of a team? As opposed to if you just let some players go out and do what it is that they do, you're just naturally going to do what needs to be done sometimes. I can think of like starting pitcher routines especially in high school, it's very common that if you're a high school player, you'll show up to the field an hour before the game. You'll do your team stretch. You'll do your team throwing. Maybe you've got some hitting in the cages that you can do. They'll hit fly balls and ground balls, and then the game starts. You're ready to go. Like, that doesn't fit a starting pitcher schedule of, if you're a starter, you go to the field. When I was a starter, I was 40 minutes before game time. I go do my stretches. I get my long toss in. I do my bullpen work, and I'm ready to go. That didn't fit a team routine. And I can only imagine there are probably some coaches out there that would have looked at this and labeled me not a team player when I was just simply doing like what every high-level amateur and pro starting pitcher actually does. So the twists on this, and I think that the context clues, I know that we kind of started this discussion talking about the actual sayings and the cliches that people put together, but the movie Bull Durham, I think, is a good example of learning your cliches, because it's such a good deflection tool of sometimes if you can have a conversation where you just say absolutely nothing, it suggests that you're actually playing the part. But like, not everything should be media training. Like, if you're actually working with the lives and the development of other people, you shouldn't just be avoiding them like you're trying to avoid a press headline or something like this. But I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of different ways to make it sound like you know what you're talking about, but I think this is part of why it's so easy to label really beneficial and really like knowledgeable coaches, because those are the ones that don't say the recycled things. And it's kind of crazy to think this, but the things that are the most overheard and oversaid in a baseball field are typically coming from the most underqualified coaches, because the qualified ones don't have any need to say it, I guess.
Yeah. It's weird because, like you said, you have this team concept when you're young where, like, if you're not doing what everybody else is doing, then you're kind of labeled as not a team player. Well, as you start to play more, it's like, and now in the minor leagues, it's like, hitters, you go do what is going to make you hit as many home runs as possible. And pitchers, you go do what's going to make you strike out as many people as possible. And that's like what we're both working on, right? I mean, there's differences there. There's some outliers where, like, oh, this guy hits for average, like the guy with the Marlins.
Yeah,
but
sure.
There's some outliers, but most of the time that's the idea. It's like, but then when you're in college, it's like, hey, we're going to work on Team D for a long time. We're going to do this kind of stuff for a long time. You know, like your pre-game routine or your, you know, pitching work is secondary to like the team activity, which in my mind doesn't make a lot of sense, but also like you're dealing with people of different maturity levels here, right? Like you have a group of like sheep that need to be like herded and maintained so they don't get off track.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't credit the kids who are like really putting a lot of time and thought into their work because they feel like they're constrained by this environment, even though some kids like need that constraint. Now, as soon as you get to the point where now you can kind of let everybody do their thing, then the people who are more diligent tend to like take off, and the people who aren't tend to just lose it right away. So it's kind of more so your job, I feel like, as a college coach to kind of rally together and create this one average that's higher than what your average would be if you let everybody spread out and do their thing.
That's actually an interesting point, you know, and it's amazing to see the level of resources too. And I mean, now that you kind of say this, it got me thinking of, you want to give every player something, and it's very hard to do that in a college setting where you're not allowed any more coaches than they are. I mean, you get 3 paid coaches and a volunteer assistant, those 4 to supervise maybe up to 40 players. And I think of the hesitancy that comes with that, because you don't want to overlook anybody, you don't want to discredit anybody, but at the same time, you want to give everybody something to work on. And like you're saying, this really specialized players that like know how they want to develop and know how they want to progress. It's difficult for them to feel like they're getting what they need if all they're getting is just kind of some cliche phrase for how they're supposed to work on something. But at the same time, how many players in an amateur or college setting are actually going to really take the time to think about that Like to actually take it to heart. And I'm not calling out laziness necessarily, but I'm just speaking of when you recognize the hesitancy that might come together and you need to give players something. I think there's a lot to be said on that kind of setting. But I agree as far as you don't know the commitment level that you're going to get out of players. And I think that it's cool to see in like a college summer ball setting of when you're independent of your actual school. And that's where you can kind of start taking it into your own to say, this is how I need to take it more serious and go into my business. And I think that's where you see a lot of strides with certain players. But was there ever a point in your career of, I mean, you've always been very diligent. I mean, fact of the matter, you're on the show every single day. I mean, that proves you're diligent, like talking about this kind of thing. But we talked about yesterday of you would show up to Cardinals games and you would keep score. Like your dad and you are sitting in the stands at Busch Stadium with scorecards, checking this thing out. Is there a difference in like the upbringing of, do you feel, I mean, I'm sure that that level of sophistication of just being very baseball minded at such an early age, did you always feel like those discussions were present about kind of questioning the norms instead of just simply following along with them? Is that something that no matter what age you were, was that always kind of a standard?
Yeah, I would say my dad always wanted me to do things the right way. Like we would go to I remember high school practices where our high school coach would say, "Yeah, you guys can wear shorts today. It's just going to be an easy practice. We're just going to hit some BP and like play catch, and that's it." And I would get ready to go to practice, and I would have my shorts on, and my dad would be like, you're wearing pants. He's like, you're not on a baseball field unless you're wearing pants. So I'd go to practice, and everybody would like, high school kids are all like poking fun at me because I'm wearing pants, But I appreciated that. And like, that's how I kind of approached the game after in college and in professional baseball. Just do the thing the right way. Don't wear something stupid. Don't and don't complain about the system. Like when my dad told me to wear pants, like that was like, okay, yeah, I'm wearing pants. Like I'm not gonna argue. I'm gonna go and wear pants. But if I was a college coach, what you said about summer ball is I would call and check in on all the summer coaches on my players.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So I have a good idea of what they're like when there is no structure or nobody telling them, what to do. Just to kind of get a better feel of how they are when they're on their own. Because, like I said, you have to be, as a college coach, you don't really know till you know who needs to be corralled. So you just kind of corral everybody. And if you feel like people are in the dugout, like we mentioned in the beginning of the episode, where they're not where most of the team's not paying attention, they're joking around or giggling or laughing or like poking somebody on the shoulder or so, I don't know. Or I'm picturing just this, and that's why I said poke on the shoulder. I'm just picturing this happening in the dugout. But your way to communicate that, or the way to kind of get everybody on the same page and like make them focus, might be saying something like, we need more energy in the dugout to get everybody focused on the game and like not dilly-dallying or doing whatever it is.
That's funny too, because now that I think about it, I think about how much of a black and white thinker I might have just been in my own playing career. I would hear something like that from a coach, and it's coming from, at my house, we're watching MLB Network is pretty much permanently on the TV. I mean, if it's not that, it's some other game on a different channel. But, the messages that you receive, and I think about like when I was in high school, for example, there are people that probably didn't follow baseball as much as I do. I mean, I know there wasn't, because we followed baseball a sickening amount in my household. But those messages of, we need more energy in the dugout. I'm going home telling my dad this, going, that's so overused. Like, why are we really doing this? As we're watching a baseball game and like analyzing what's going on there. And there's a kid that maybe hasn't turned a TV on to watch a baseball game or looked at a box score, or here it is, I'm carving through Fangraphs and Baseball Savant out of curiosity and reading development articles. And like, those messages aren't exactly geared for somebody that has that type of commitment or diligence to what they want to learn in baseball, because not everybody really shares that. And that's okay too. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think about sometimes it would be better if, as a player, I recognized they're not exactly saying this message for you. think of this as they're addressing the team. They're not simply addressing you individually. They're not saying that what you do is wrong when they're addressing the entire team, or they would be addressing you individually. So I think about the context of those levels of interactions, and I think that this is a very mature way of looking at it, going, if a coach is blowing up on the team, they might not be blowing up on you. And it's very important to recognize that he's calling out the unit, he or she, whatever it is, that coach is calling out the collective as opposed to the individual when it comes to just somebody absolutely blowing up on the team like that. So I think that you're a lot better at that than I am, actually, because we would come into the apartment that we lived in. I remember being pretty frustrated over certain things, and you were always the peacemaker that gave me that context. So thank you, by the way.
Well, I just always thought there's outliers. There's people that really suck at doing the right thing and staying in line, and then there's people that are really good at it, and then there's people that overdo it and they're trying to be way too much in line and way too much of a brown noser, I guess. Say that. But and then there's also the people, the kind of person that I felt like you were, who was very thoughtful about what was going on. It's really aware of what was happening. And you kind of knew you're watching, you're paying attention, who hit who did this, what kind of outing this guy threw. But then, there's other people messing around, and then coach is like, hey, we need more energy to dug out. And you're like, I am. But then it comes to the extra level of realizing that they're all different and you're the outlier. So you just kind of let it fizzle off, I guess. You just kind of let it.
Yeah, there's at least a level of discipline to recognize. Now, I know what you're saying, and I think that this is, it continually is a reflection of the world was made for those that aren't cursed with self-awareness. That's not my own sentence. I stole that from somebody else. But, I think about finding the joy in what it is, and sometimes when you need something to say, if you're trusted with an authority position, you're assumed that you need to take action, or else it's going to look like you don't care, which is a big, I think about, I have a lot of respect for the coaches that understand when to be hands off, because that's a huge method of self-correction in player development and in human development at that. The coaches that are overbearing, making corrections all the time. Well, you're not allowing your students to actually know how to make the corrections if you're overstepping there. But at the same time, as a coach, you're expected to have something to say to everybody at any given point in time. And I think this is part of the reason that I've kind of been, me being naturally a very thoughtful type of, I like to carry the lot of intellect of being the awareness, like you mentioned. I don't say that to selfishly promote myself, but I think about when you are tasked with that level of awareness for 30 other people all at the same exact time, sometimes you have to lean on certain things that maybe you don't know what to say, but you need to say something, which is a dangerous position to be in. And I think about, even outside of baseball, I feel like this has got to be a lot more common than people would think. How many times have you been sitting in a classroom and you walk out of the classroom and you think to yourself, that class could have been 10 minutes and it ended up being an hour? Well, the class had to be an hour because legally that's how long you need to be in school for. And it's those, you have to fill things up. Sometimes you just have to. If we have an hour episode, we're going to have to fill it up if we don't have an hour, one way or another. So that reminds me Conan O'Brien during the writer's strike, when he had no writers to actually write his jokes for him on the Tonight Show, and he had to just scramble to fill an entire episode. I'm not accusing any coaches of doing that, but I can only imagine if you're in that lost territory and you're trying to figure out a way to navigate. But coaching cliches, baseball cliches, man.
Well, here I'll say this
it's more exciting when it's fans.
Is that I feel like it's important for a coach to make sure to build relationships with all the players. Not just because, that kind of thing happens where you get mixed messages as a player if you never get to talk to your coach. And the coach is never real with you, Now, of course, there's some ages of kids and some types of kids that can't handle the truth a lot of the time. But, if you have this, really big disconnect with your coach, and he starts saying blanketed statements of the team, you get confused thinking wait, am I one of the people who he's talking about? Yes. So, and I mean, you don't have to as a coach go up to people and, make sure to tell them everything they're doing right and great every single day. But when you see that person, like, there needs to be less of a, like, and it's a lot of times I feel like the player's fault because they're just so young and they don't know how to, like, interact with an older person. But if there needs to be less of a barrier there and more of like a kind of friendship sort of, like, I guess like a father figure role where you can kind of say whatever you want to the coach and the coach can say kind of whatever he wants to you, like, within reason. Because I know that someday when I'm coaching, like, I know for a fact that if I have 20 pitchers, there's going to be a handful that don't really like me very much, and there's nothing I could do about it.
It's natural, though. That's the way it is.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be trying my best in order to minimize that number in terms of results. Because if you really like your coach, you're probably going to get better results, even if they tell you even if you need to hear the same thing this player does and this player likes you and this player doesn't, tell them both the same thing. The one that doesn't like you very much is probably not going to be the one that's going to get the most out of it. So I think the most important thing in kind of mitigating all the stuff that we're talking about is just having more of a family relationship with your players where you feel comfortable speaking to each other and telling them exactly how you feel, and you're both able to handle the truth about how they're doing.
Knowing how to meet them on their level. Sure.
Yeah.
I think about, like, the most essential coaches sometimes, and I realize this discussion started out talking about, like, the overused phrases, but I think that more importantly, to offset any potential position where you could be scrambling about how do I address this situation, like, I don't think that it's preached enough of just be a human.
Yeah.
Like, I know that's kind of a really crazy thing to say, but just be authentic. And if you're genuine and if you're approachable, that can offset any potential deficiencies that you might otherwise have. I mean, that's not going to replace somebody that really knows what they're doing. But when it comes to command, like when it comes to commanding others, and I can think of, there are some people in the baseball world that maybe I might kind of question their intellect or what they're trying to contribute to the game. But one thing that is never questioned is, like, their love and their passion and their enthusiasm. And those are people that you go to war. Like, no matter what else they bring to the table, that's so infectious, and that just carries you through so many different things. And that's why we're here doing what we do, man.
I'll say this too.
We're putting the show together.
If there's a coach that I know has no clue what he's doing, like, if I know that he has no clue and he's just, but if he is able to communicate with me on, like, a human level and not like a teacher to a student kind of level, then I'm gonna get something out of it. Even if he has no clue what's going on, I'm gonna be able to bounce thoughts off of him. I'm gonna be able to talk about this, and he could be the smartest guy in the world, or he could be about pitching, or be the dumbest guy in the world about pitching. It doesn't matter if the relationship of being a human is not there. That doesn't matter, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's juice behind that. I'll kind of tie into this, a story that I heard. There's he used to be a hitting coach for the Rockies. His name's Mike Bard. And he told me something when I was 13 that stuck with me. I mean, I still think about this to this day he was like, had this entire group of kids just eating out of the palm of his hand. Great speaker. And he said, "You are the king. You're the king." He said, "You can listen to what you want to listen to. You can take what you want to hear. You can accept it. You can not accept it. But whenever there's a pink slip in your locker and you are told that you cannot play this game anymore, you want to know that everything that you were told and everything that you had the opportunity to absorb, you absorbed it and you did with it what you needed to do based on what you knew at that present moment in time." And sometimes it might be disregarding the cliches. Sometimes it might be looking at it from a little bit more of a higher level. But I think of, if you begin with the end in mind of what am I really looking to get out of this, and what is this applied going to look like in a month's time, in 2 months' time, in 5 years' time? If I'm out of baseball, how is that going to lead me? How am I going to find closure at the end of my career? It's amazing to see how those small details can really make a lasting impact. And I don't mean to turn this into so much of a philosophical discussion, but the context behind this is you're the king. Like, it's your career and you get to roll with it. So that's kind of crazy business, but it's our show and we get to roll with it the way that we want to roll with it.
That's right.
And that's why we're here, doing what we want to do. And in the words of Evan Johnson, if he's a coach in charge of 20 pitchers, chances are there's going to be a few that don't like it. If you're tuning into the show, chances are there's going to be some viewers that don't like it. And in the words of Evan Johnson, he doesn't care. So there you go.
I'm going to do my best, so if you still don't like it, I'm sorry.
I was trying to tie that in so hard. That was such a mess. My friends, we are going to take a short break. This is episode 12, the first half of the Night Pitch. We'll be right back.
The sound of your footsteps coming down. Hurries now, steps coming.
One has to know what hard hit actually means. It means they hit it hard, yes, but hard has to have a threshold in order to be calculated. 95 is when exit velocity really starts to contribute to hitter success. Anything hit 95 or harder off the bat has a huge jump in weighted on base average. Barrel percentage is where things get a little bit more complex. A barrel must be hit at least 98 miles an hour off the bat, and from there, any baseball at that speed with a launch angle between 26 and 30 degrees is defined as barreled. If you hit a ball harder than 98, the launch angle range will expand depending on how much harder it's hit. The range of angle will gradually grow until 116 miles an hour, and at that point, anything between 8 and 50 degrees off the bat is a barrel. Baseball Savant is the go-to platform for barrels and hard hit percentage. Their leaderboards are easily sorted, very easy to understand, and when the guys atop this list are at the plate, there's a good chance that something really cool is going to happen. Welcome back to episode 12. Evan wants to do a little social experiment. We've talked about how the intent, you're already smiling, goodness. We've talked about how the intent behind the Night Pitch is we want to replicate a minor league bus ride without the bus, or we want to replicate the fourth inning of a game in the bullpen that you know that you're not going to pitch. Those ideas come completely organic. There is no premeditated discussion. There is no script. We have a very loose script here on the Night Pitch. Every so often, we'll actually put some things together. We'll write it down. We'll put some show notes together. We want to keep the cohesive flow of the program rolling. But then we realize that we're stepping away from the entire intent behind why we do what we do and why we want the show to be loose, because we want it to be organic like it is if you're an actual player in those contexts. So we don't have a topic for the second half of this show. This is Evan's idea. So if it absolutely flops, I'm blaming you.
Perfect.
Because I don't want to be liable as the host here. But I'm just going to continue to put that. I'm very diligent. I like being very meticulous. We like keeping it clean. But yeah. So how do we want to stage this? All right.
You want me to take it away?
Into the fourth inning. All right, here we go. I just sat down. I just walked from the dugout to the bullpen. I opened the gate. I closed the gate. I sat down. You're right next to me.
Action.
Yeah.
Remember that time you came to see me? I'm kind of breaking your mold right here already, but remember that time you came to see me in Everett? What'd you think of that ballpark?
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah.
You liked Everett's ballpark?
Oh, that was sweet. Oh, we're going to turn this into story time? Yeah. Oh, I'm about this. Everett's nice. Well, I remember the first thing, and that's funny. I'll kind of expand on this a little bit. That was the COVID year.
Yeah.
So it was 2020, well, I guess 2021, the first year back from it. And it was opening day. And I remember my girl was
You were there
working
for
at
opening
Driveline.
day?
I believe so, because it was hard for you to confirm if you could get tickets, and you said buy some just in case you couldn't get some. I'm pretty sure it was.
Oh, getting tickets there is tough, by the way. Not because there's so many people there, but because
restriction too.
Well, not because there's so many people there, but because nobody knows how to get the tickets. Like I go walk to the ticket booth and ask for tickets, and they don't know how to do it.
Oh. It's just me knowing the ticketing systems on the back end, I kind of have sympathy for this, because sometimes you would think that this is a very simple thing, but it isn't.
Okay, maybe it's not, but I was always like, just put it on a sticky note, just put it on the wall.
That's true. Fundamentally, it's like, how hard is it? Like, just put 2 tickets down and be good. Well, we ended up getting the tickets. I mean, it was cool. Thank you, by the way. That was really freaking cool. That was a good day.
That was a good day.
The ballpark was awesome. I remember walking in, and I'm a sucker for minor league parks, just like because it's blue collar, it's pure, it's awesome. I remember parking at Everett.
They're all very unique too.
Yeah, I remember it was like April, or no, it was May because they had to push back the start of the year because they had the alternate site, and the minor league spring training for the minor leagues was in April that year. So it was May, and I remember it was a 7 p.m. start. The sun is still out because you're in northern Washington and the sun doesn't go down until 11:30 sometimes.
Yeah.
Not really. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but you know what I mean.
I think it's so.
I remember my girl and I walked in. We parked. We're checking it out. We're like behind the outfield fence, and we're like, there's no seats behind the outfield fence, which is cool, but you know there's a game going. They were absolutely blasting music, which was awesome. And it was like a bunch of 70s funk. And I'm going, this is so pure. Like, this is so genuine. I am so about this. But I liked the ballpark because, like, the manual scoreboard that you guys had in right center field.
Yeah.
You guys had the video board in left center and the manual board that was like Ebbets Field type of thing where it was in play. Like, I'm a sucker for a good manual scoreboard, dude.
Well, let me just tell whoever's listening to the second half of this episode,
the counterparts that are on the other end of the dugout bench that are sitting silent. There we go.
Yeah. I'm gonna go through from right field to left field and tell you the distances of the fence. So, right field.
Hang on, let me add this in. The wall is rock hard. Like, that thing will bounce off the wall.
It's all wood wall, except for right field. It's a chain link fence with like a pad underneath. It kind of looks like there should be a bullpen behind it, but it's just a hill.
Yeah, that's right.
With a giant action figure, or a Funko, they call it. Freddie Funko.
It's Funko Field. Yeah, you guys represent.
So down the right field line, it's 335. Okay, and then right center is 330. Center field is 350. Left center is 390.
Yeah, that's right.
And then left field is 330. So your right center field is 330, your center field is 350, and then your left center is 390.
If you're a right-handed power hitter and you just absolutely put a charge into one and it's a little bit cold at the beginning, that's another thing too. Like, being that far north is you're not getting the summertime carry on the ball. Well, like, when you were a pitcher there, did you see, I mean, I get that you're kind of trying to execute a scouting report and your own strengths and where they're saying put baseballs, but would there ever be like a game plan where you would be like, well, I know that I literally cannot be beat to the left side of the field? Like, was that ever in the thought of your mind there?
Well, you can hit home runs to left field, but left center is pretty tough. But it's still guys will still get there. It's a lot of home runs in that park, but the wall's also really tall. The thing that would come up most of the time, because we wouldn't look at a lot of like player to player scouting reports. We'd look a lot at like what we're doing and how to pitch better in terms of our strengths. But we would look at I would go in. I gave up a home run one time to right center, which is 330, and it's a really tall wall. And I went in and asked what like the catch probability was on that ball that was a home run in right center, and it was like 99.99% or something stupid like that, and it was a home run. And a lot of guys on that short wall, because it's just wood and it bounces super hard, if they hit a shot like right center gap, it's a single.
Oh, sure. It's like the Fenway treatment. Yeah. If you hit an absolute seed to left field in Boston. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It hits off the wall and it goes right to the outfielder, and then they'll throw it to second base and the guy will stop like as he's rounding because he can't get two. It's like impossible to get a double there.
You know, you mentioned you went into the dugout and you found out the catch probability. How quickly did you get that information?
Well, that was
that during the game?
No, that was the next day. That was the next day.
Oh, God.
Like when the
You made it
report.
sound like you literally went in at like the half
No.
between after you got pulled or something. I was like, that'd be electric.
It was in the report, and like a lot of times they'll take that into account in giving your pitching report, and they'll just tell you, they'll say like, hey, you could pitch in Everett and give up 5 home runs, but your report could be great because the ballpark
awesome,
is so tiny. Well, the reason it juts in like that in right field is because their front office is behind the center field fence, and they have a parking lot, and the parking lot like cuts into the outfield. Here's what we're gonna do. When we edit this, where's my finger going? I want Wick to put like an outline of the ballpark and what it looks like right there.
I will draw it up. I will draw up Funko Field.
Because if you look at it, and if you can see it,
you guys are listening to this, you're seeing this right now.
And you can see it right now, right here. You can see, like, I'm going to just pretend it's right here. You can see where the parking lot is because it just cuts into the entire outfield. It just looks so funky, and that's why they call it Funko Field.
Well, you're talking about that lot in right center. That's where Lauren, my girl, and I, we parked there in right center, and then we walked all the way around like the outfield fence, and then we ended up coming in towards I don't know, like a third base gate, I think. But I remember walking around thinking to myself, it looked like a fortress because of how tall the fence was, which is cool. I mean, that's a different type of feel. It is what it is. I also remember we're sitting down the left. This is kind of taking it to a different side, but that's why we're doing this segment on the second half. Her and I were sitting like on the lip of the infield dirt on the third base side, and the Everett bullpen was by the left field foul pole. And so you're hanging out there just sitting in the bullpen having a good time. And it was opening day, so it was a new crop of players, some existing, but I mean a lot of new guys. And I was looking at you between innings, and like you just waved at me, you're like, hey man. And then all of a sudden all these Aqua Sox players are looking up at me because I'm like, what's up, dude? And then like we're having a full-on conversation. Well, I didn't actually tell you this, but there was a dude that was seated like halfway between you and me. Like your head is right here and his head is like halfway in front, but it's like right there to where he was thinking I was talking to him for like an inning and a half. So I felt like such a clown. Finally, he came up to me and he's like, what's going on? I was like, who the hell are you? No, I didn't say that. I was like, what do you mean? Like, are you talking to me? And I'm just like, he was literally watching your and my interactions between innings, thinking that it was normal, and I felt like such a clown. So I had to explain to him. And I think at one point you leaned over to a teammate and you were like, what's going on? He's like, yeah, that's my college roommate up there. And I don't know what player this was, but then he started getting it on. Oh, what's up, dude?
Yeah. I don't know if you saw this while you're there, because you're near the bullpen, but that wood wall that runs the whole thing, we throw, our bullpen is not like down the line so much as it is in like the corner, like the outfield corner.
It's like cut out, yeah.
It's right next to the outfield wall, and the catcher's right in front of the wall. And instead of putting pads like on the wall, they just kept it wood. So like, if you're warming up and you like just first pitch, you're trying to get hot, you just yeet one over the catcher, it's a loud noise and everybody can hear it. A lot of times it bounces on the field. So I don't know if you heard that while you're there.
It goes into left field, they gotta pause the game. Yeah, that's pretty good. Oh, that's actually a good talking point too, of when you're warming up in the bullpen. I can think of a time that I remember a player drilling the padding 3 or 4 times in a row, and then they called on the bullpen phone to sit that player down. I felt so bad. I felt so bad for this kid. Oh, it was I don't feel good sharing this. I'll keep it anonymous because I don't want to be rated. Very good pitcher. He ended up throwing very well. But just he didn't have it on a particular day, and it was so sad. With balls, I know we kind of talked about that before.
But the dugouts,
I think the dangerous.
What were you going to say?
If it bounces. Oh, I was talking about like that fence at Everett. Like if it bounces and if it potentially hits the catcher in the back of the head, I can think of me growing up in Colorado, and you're probably in Iowa like this. We would use our high school gym for baseball practice if the weather was bad or if there was snow on the
brick
ground
or something.
And the cinder block walls in a high school gym. Or I liked the the bleachers, like when you push the bleachers up so you have the full gym, and then you just hear somebody just drill the plastic seams. So sad.
Oh yeah, that's it. Did hit him sometimes, but a lot of times, like if guys missed bad enough, they weren't in danger of the catcher wasn't in danger of getting.
That's true.
You know, because if it's like right here, he's catching it. Like if it's here, he's catching it. You know, but like, and if it hits the ground, it loses some speed, so it's not bad if it like bounces back. But yeah, there's a lot of space in that bullpen to just kind of like lay around and do some mobility and all sorts of stuff because it's turf. One of the things about Everett was their dugouts were probably like 15 feet away from home plate. Like
that's also
major
true. That's
danger
awesome.
zone.
Yeah,
but they had the fence where everybody stood to watch the game, but then below the fence they put a bat rack, like just a big bucket to like throw the bats in. So everybody stands on the bat rack because there's nowhere to stand, and if you're sitting, you can't see because it's too high. So if you
and you're gonna get drilled.
If there is a foul ball, you're not jumping off the bat rack to get out of the way. But it's really, really close. It's really close.
Yeah. That's interesting too. Talking about like dugout design. I get like for some older parks it maybe is a little bit more of a challenge, but like the railing on dugouts, how like if it's perfect, you just kind of put your arms up, you're good. Like all the big league parks have it figured out, sure, but like why is there not any? I'm speaking more of like the amateur level of. I can think of just some atrocious dugouts that you played in. I don't want to badmouth Thunder Bay because I actually really do like their park, but their dugouts, it's like there's a step and then another step to the top of the fence, but they're very narrow steps, and these steps are like 2.5 feet tall. So like you have to be standing like on the sides of your feet to be propped up over like on the actual fence itself.
I would say Thunder Bay's dugouts are a little bit wider than Everett's.
Yeah,
like you can't fit two people walk in different directions. Like you gotta like shimmy, and the stairs to go out are like they're just one person at a time. So like you're not gonna get two people in and out of the dugout in the same go. It's kind of they're very similar to Thunder Bay. They are.
Jeez, that's interesting. Now that I think about this, like places to sit. I know that we've talked about this a little bit too, but like when I was playing at St. Cloud summer ball, I had my spot in the dugout, and it was pretty routine. I would go down in the middle of the 5th inning because I knew I was probably going to be a later inning setup guy type of thing. Middle of the 5th inning, I'd go to the bullpen, but from the first up until then, we had, of course, the bench, but we didn't have a fence. Like there was no fence, and there was like a little lip of concrete. So there was 2 steps, and then you'd go into the field, but there was just a lip, no fence blocking. You could run in and out like that. I would always sit on that little lip of concrete about 2/3 of the way down the dugout, and I liked it because you could hear the fans, you could see a little bit more, and not many people would really sit there. That was just kind of my spot. I liked hanging out there. So my feet were actually on the dirt itself, but there was a lot of foul territory there. I remember one game, like 2/3 of the way through one of the summers I was up there. This is the first time I've ever been kicked out of a placement. The umpire told me I couldn't be there. And our entire dugout has been like, he's been there for 40 games.
Just now.
So
you're the same umpire every other day.
That's true. I was going to say. So I'm thinking it was probably like a 3-man umpire crew of the second base umpire was just waiting for the chance for him to be behind home.
Yeah.
But it happened in like the 1st inning too. So I was all bummed out. So I ended up walking down to the bullpen that day in like the 2nd inning because I'm sitting somewhere. I'm not doing this. So the relievers that were already down there, they were like shocked, and I walked them through it. But then it's funny too because when you fall into such a routine as a baseball player, like other players will start to catch on to your routine, and when your routine isn't followed, like something like that, they'll actually be on your side because that's how they identify you as a person. So I was flattered. That was a humbling moment right there, man.
I always appreciated the dugouts with no fence. I mean, you like to lean on the ones, but like the ones that are completely open, those feel very baseball to me. Like where the inning change and everybody just runs out and like different, you can run in wherever. Yeah. I like that. The ones that, this doesn't happen very often anymore, but the ones with chain link in front of your face.
Yeah.
Those like,
like
old
the cages?
school, yeah, the old school city fields. I hate looking through the chain link. That's the worst.
Yeah.
That is the worst.
Well, I remember we played, the University of Minnesota will play at US Bank Stadium where the Vikings play. They'll do that for like the first half of the year before the weather warms up. And like the dugouts there are like modified shipping containers.
Yeah.
With like that chain link.
They bring them in and like fold them out. And then they have the intro, like the enter and exit.
And that was another one. Like you literally had to go on the sides of it, and they had the chain link on the front. That was a good one. I know my junior college, we had a fence, but at the bottom of the fence, I mean, it was a good fence. You could put your stuff on. It was cool, but the bottom of the fence itself had about like 8 inches of clearance.
Yeah.
So I wondered if they did that on purpose, just as like a mind game for junior college players. If you're not in high school anymore, if you overthrow this might kick into the dugout and you get an extra base. So I remember like my subconscious mind was thinking to myself, what was the point of not continuing this all the way down to the ground?
Yeah.
So that was good. We had a little bit. I'm trying to think, is there any place that you've been that like the home dugout is significantly better than the visiting dugout? Like when people try to play an advantage there?
Oh man.
Like I'll use this as
really,
an example.
no.
Like me and JUCO, Mesa Community College had like the visiting dugout was half the size of the home dugout. They also had a whiteboard, magnetic board for a scoreboard. Good times.
I don't think so. I mean, but the places I've played though, I don't. No, not really. I mean, the only thing with St. Cloud, if I remember right, what did the visiting dugout have? Okay, let's say this: if the locker room is detached from the visiting dugout, then yes, it's way worse. Where like some teams have both locker rooms like behind the home dugout, and then play the visiting teams to go around to get to the locker room. Like in Everett, we'll just keep talking about Everett. In Everett, the locker room is detached from the stadium. And you go up from the bullpen, like across a track. And then you
that's
go
right.
upstairs.
Yeah, you go up like some steps.
Yeah, and then you're up high, and you can overlook the field, and there's like a little balcony or whatever. But the visiting bullpen, if they want to go back to the locker room during the game, whereas like we can go in and out, like if we need stuff. But like they have to go.
Oh, that's true.
All across behind the umpire. They have to go behind the umpire, in front of the home dugout, all the way down through our bullpen, and then up to the locker room if they need to go to the locker room.
You know, this is interesting you say that too, because like I mean the way that it continues to progress. When I worked as a writer and I had like credentials to cover big league games, I can remember being authorized to go to like the service level of, you know, if you're a writer, you're able to go on the field for batting practice. You're able to go into the clubhouse to like cover. I just hit my microphone and that really bothered me. If I don't center this again, there we go. I can remember I was at Chase Field. The Rockies were playing the Diamondbacks, and this was the first time that I had ever been on like that level of Chase Field. And I remember I took the elevator down. I remember walking through just an absolute maze of trying to figure out how to get to field level.
Yeah, the tunnels.
Like I didn't want to look like I didn't belong, but it was one of these. I was so timid because this was the first time I'd ever been at this level. The Chase Field press box at the press level is very difficult to get through, like a maze of tunnels. I mean, it's a very well planned out ballpark. It's just that it's some weird stuff if you've never been there before. So I can recall finally a security guy is like, "Are you looking for something?" No, I'm good. I'm all right. Like I didn't want to tell him that I didn't know what I was.
Oh no!
So I remember like convincing myself, trying to be like, just play it cool, just don't be weird. So, anyways, I finally found the tunnel, got me to field level. They scanned my credential. I'm like, all right, this is where I'm supposed to be. But when you recognize like the difference between the amateur levels to, I mean, I presume the minor leagues in many respects to, let's say if you get to AAA, like the requirements of different venues are a little bit higher as you can progress through the minors. And then when I was at Chase Field and I was looking in the dugout, I wasn't allowed in the dugout or in that tunnel, but I was allowed in the clubhouse to where I could see where the tunnel would go. And I was like, this is literally the most convenient of all. Like, this is incredible. And then I found out that if you're in the bullpen, you don't need to go onto the field in order to get back to the dugout. You can go back into the service level behind the dugout or behind the bullpen. You can walk through the tunnel to the clubhouse, to the locker, to the dugout. So like I realized that like when there's a different access point to get to the bullpen, if you really needed to, like if for whatever reason you're hanging out in the dugout, you're like, I need to get to the bullpen. I can't run on the field because this is the big leagues. Like you can just go in the service level and you're good to go. But that was when it really hit me. And then when I realized like they had a weight room back there too, like there's literally a full-on squat rack at the ballpark just between the clubhouse and the dugout itself. Like I'm thinking Trevor Rosenthal put a bunch of tweets together. I'm hogging the spotlight right now. This is me talking your ear off on the dugout bench.
Keep going.
Nice. Trevor Rosenthal, pitcher, he was the closer for the Cardinals and a couple other teams. On Twitter, he put together a whole thread of all 30 big league stadiums talking about what's the best bullpen setup. And he talked about the service level at the big leagues of being able to not have to go on to field level to access things. He said that was one of the most incredible things that you wouldn't ever really think about. Like, I wish everybody got a chance to at least one time play in a big league field just to see that and just to see how the sophistication can jump. There's some incredible stuff, man.
Well, we both have experience with TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab now.
That's true.
That field, I mean, it's less complicated. There's indoor cages, but like the tunnels are less complicated.
That's true.
But yeah, there's you don't really have to. I mean, if you're in the bullpen, yeah, but if you're in the dugout, you can get anywhere via the service tunnel. You can go to the concourse because there's an elevator to it and everything else. But
you could. That's right.
The one of the most confusing ones for me was Las Vegas. I went to do
the Aviator.
I went to fill in the Aviators, and I remember going to the field, and I'm like, I leave the room and I look, and there's like, it seems like 4 different hallways diverting in different directions. And then I am walking to the field and I hit like 3 different T intersections and there's just no signs. So I'm like waiting for other pitchers to like show me where to go because I'm getting lost in service level
and trying to play the part. Yeah, you're trying to find out how do I not look clueless as I'm in a new uniform right now.
Turns out the service level is a complete maze. Like just to even get to where the locker room is. Like I was lucky I was with somebody who had also never been there before because I would not have known how to get to the locker room at all because you had to go to like all the way around the stadium to like some weird like left center like door that you wouldn't even recognize, and you go in and you go all the way around, take 2 more lefts, do a loop-de-loop, then you're at the locker room. But I think the most streamlined one that I've seen has been TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab.
Yeah.
So you come in, you can only go right, and when you go right, you run into everything. Can't divert off the path very far.
Yeah, that's interesting too because it's typical for that venue itself to host multiple games in the same day. Like, I mean, almost every day in the College World Series is at least a doubleheader, and even with rain, you might actually have a game too. Like the Big Ten tournament when it was been there, they've played 4 games in a day pretty routinely. Which, as for how the grounds crew keeps up with that, huge shout out to them. Goodness gracious. It's even like in the event operations world of realizing how if you overcomplicate things even just 2%, how much that can throw things off. And like the architectural design of when I started really thinking about ballpark design as a means to how can you simplify things to the easiest possible way for the masses to be able to understand. You got to make that a priority, and then sometimes the other side isn't a priority of, all right, well, the players are going to be led by somebody. How do we get this? But as far as like collective design, that ballpark in Omaha, I think it helps that this is another thing. Big league parks, like I grew up a Rockies fan. Coors Field is dug into the ground. Of the playing surface is about like 20 feet or so below street level.
Right.
And I think it's interesting in Omaha, I think the playing surface itself is right on the level of street level. Like the home plate setup, it looks like Coors Field is almost just as tall from the outside of the home plate gate as that park in Omaha is.
Well, yeah,
but it's because Coors Field was dug into the ground.
Every gate at TD, you have to walk up the stairs to be at the concourse level, and then there's obviously the seats that go down. But that park is streamlined for getting people in and out and teams in and out. That's so easy to
That's
get in there and
pretty-
move around.
Well, and the concourses are super wide. Well, this is another thing. I actually want to hear your take on this of modernized ballparks or prioritizing those versus venues that Stephen A. Smith was talking about the Rose Bowl, talking about how, it's a dated facility. Yes, it's storied, but the traffic is a nightmare. The logistics that are not an issue at modern ballparks or modern stadiums, they don't really exist there. But like, I wish that there was a way to just hybridize. This is what makes these old time ballparks tremendous. And this is what we can do to preserve the old time style of what the game was celebrated for. I think about Rosenblatt being torn down in Omaha. I never had the opportunity to go there, and I would have loved to get the chance to go. And I always felt like it wasn't I felt guilty praising TD Ameritrade Park as much as I did without having seen what it was before. Like, I'd driven by, but I'd never seen a game there. But at the same time, yeah, I was just complaining about dugouts that are unaccommodating, so I guess I kind of got to take one side or the other now that I think about it.
I'll appreciate the old stadiums, even if it sucks to get in and out and do all the things and the amenities suck. Just because there's so much history there, Like the modern ballparks are cool, but at the end of the day, it's like there's not like a wow factor of like, let's say you played at like Fenway or Wrigley.
Yeah.
Like that's like you play at one of those, like that's a wow factor.
Yeah.
You play at
that's sacred ground.
because you go to Las Vegas Aviators Stadium, it's brand new. Yeah, it's cool, but like what would you rather play it? Right?
Yeah.
I
mean I hear there. That's amazing too. I think about like the wave of ballparks being constructed too, of like at what point does a new park just hit like that? I'll think of it. There's a teammate of mine that was from New York City, and when he was in high school, he played in a showcase game at the new Yankee Stadium, and he's got a photo of him he's on the mound at the big league park. He was a senior in high school, and he showed me this, and I remember like going, that's really freaking cool. I think when you step too far away from like the storied context, and I understand, if the new Yankee Stadium was designed with a lot of similar respects to the old Yankee Stadium, so you're preserving those types of things.
I appreciate that.
I think this is going to sound really corny. Our whole first half of the episode was talking about avoiding cliches, and here I'm about to say one. Preserving the past and pushing towards the future. If you can find a healthy balance of those types of things, I understand that. But at the same time, like, I've heard people talk about Wrigley Field before and after the renovation that they did. They completely redid the outfield bleachers. They put up video boards for the first time. And I've heard people talk about if you were going to go to Wrigley, you needed to go before the renovations just because that was pure Wrigley. And then I've heard other people talk about it was a mess, so you need to go now. And I'm going, well, you're never going to get an accurate opinion.
Yeah.
So this is the thing, is like,
it's the trade-off.
To see how fragile human opinion can be, yeah. And just, you can be so swayed by what one person tells you, and then somebody else is going to completely change the way that you view it. Like, this is turning philosophical again, but I think about how susceptible the human mind is, that sometimes we don't even really have our mind made up, and there's so much more to the picture even on something this simple. It's weird, man.
It is. It's kind of like, 5% of the people aren't going to like your renovations.
5% of the people aren't going to like the show, and yet here we still are doing what we do.
No, I love those old
old
ballparks. I love those old ballparks. I love them.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for a good little nugget right there, man. I think this went pretty well. Are we allowed to let it? I mean, we kind of let our guard down this entire second half, but this actually, I think we need to do. Should this just be the permanent staple for the second half of the episode? Or we actually have something planned for the first half and nothing planned for the second?
I don't know. We'll see what people say.
This was pretty organic. That's right. We'll put it in the people's hands. We'll see how it goes.
Yep.
We'll keep having fun with it, man. All right, Evan, I got to let you go shovel more snow, by the way.
Yeah, I got to get the snow off this window before it breaks.
All right, before Evan loses. But if you lose power, I'm going to be really sad. One, because I'll be worried about you, and two, because we might not be able to record again soon.
Well, we got this one. We got this one done.
You're safe. If you don't hear from us for a couple days, that means we'll check in on Evan later on. Oh my goodness. All right, my friends. This has been a blast. Thank you all for tuning in. Night Pitch episode 12. He's Evan Johnson. I'm Justin Wick. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
So patient. Turn down the lights. Turn down the bed. Turn down